Hi, I'm Raina. To my family, I've always been the failure, the one who never measured up. They never knew I make $66,000 a month because no matter what I did, they only saw what I wasn't. At dinner, my sister laughed at my clothes. Her boyfriend joined in. And my parents? They told me, "Pick up your dignity. You're just trash under your sister's feet." I sat there, smiling, silent. But when the check came, I reached into my bag, pulled out my black card, and the waiter bowed. Their faces went pale. Because in that moment, they realized nothing was the same anymore. But that night, that was only the beginning. You think money fixes everything? It doesn't. Sometimes it just shows you who never wanted you to rise. Before we dive in, tell me, what time is it where you're watching this? And have you ever been treated like you were less by your own family? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear your story. The morning light slipped through the blinds, slicing thin gold lines across my apartment walls. I stood in the kitchen, still half asleep, staring at the coffee maker as it gurgled and hissed. The air smelled faintly of burnt toast and roasted beans, familiar and quiet. That kind of silence used to comfort me. Now it just made me think too much. I sat at the counter, my phone face down beside my cup. I didn't need to look at it. I already knew what was waiting. I had agreed to the dinner. My mother's voice still echoed from last night's call. "Your sister wants everyone together tonight. Don't embarrass us by being late." She hadn't said please. She never did. I told myself I didn't care, that it was just one meal. But I could already feel the heaviness of it pressing down, like humidity before a storm. I took a sip of coffee and caught my reflection in the microwave door. My own eyes looked back, calm, practiced. "Just survive it," I whispered. The words barely made a sound, but they steadied me. On the counter, a small pile of corporate files sat neatly stacked beside my laptop. A sliver of my black Amex card peeked out from my wallet. I pushed it deeper out of sight. They didn't know how well I'd done for myself, and I didn't plan to tell them. Some truths were better as secrets. The phone buzzed again. "See you at 7, my sister Marin had texted. No heart, no smile. Just a reminder disguised as authority. Marin had always been the golden one, the perfect smile, the perfect marriage, the perfect LinkedIn profile. My parents introduced her at parties as our pride. Me? I was the one who did something with computers. They never really knew what I did, and they never cared enough to ask. I stood, stretching, feeling the weight of old memories pressing on my shoulders. "They measure worth by applause, not effort," I murmured. That line had lived in my head for years. By noon, I had answered a few work emails, reviewed some project notes, and tried, unsuccessfully, to forget about the evening ahead. Around 5, I opened my closet and stared. Dresses hung in neat color-coded order. I picked a black one, simple and clean, something that said presentable but invisible. I didn't want attention. As I zipped it up, I caught my reflection again. My hair fell loose around my shoulders, professional but not severe. My makeup was soft, neutral, nothing that could be mistaken for confidence. I slipped my Amex card into a small clutch and paused for a second, fingers resting on the leather. The card's dark shine caught the light. Quiet power. I almost smiled. Then I closed the clutch and walked out. The air outside was still warm, even as the sun began to drop. Dallas in spring had that restless energy. Everyone rushing somewhere, nowhere, always pretending they weren't tired. The drive to the restaurant took 20 minutes. I played soft jazz on the radio, not because I liked it, but because silence would have been worse. When I pulled into the parking lot, the neon sign above the entrance read, "Jasper's Steakhouse." Of course, Marin would pick this place. Polished floors, soft lighting, and overpriced menus that made her feel like she'd earned something. Inside, the hostess looked up and smiled professionally. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," I said, forcing a polite tone. "Under heart." She glanced down at her tablet, then shook her head slightly. I have a party of 6 under Doyle?" My stomach tightened. Doyle, Marin's married name. "That's them," I said quietly. "Right this way," she said, turning with that rehearsed smile. As I followed, the air felt heavier. The low murmur of laughter, the clinking of cutlery, it all sounded like a stage I didn't want to walk onto. I saw them before they saw me. Marin in a pale blue dress, her husband sitting close, my mother's hand resting proudly on Marin's arm. My father scrolled through his phone, half listening to whatever joke my brother-in-law was telling. Then Marin looked up, spotting me first. "Raina, over here!" she called out, her voice bright but hollow. That same dismissive wave, half welcome, half obligation. The hostess led me to the end of the long table. The only open seat waited beside the restroom door. I hesitated a second, then sat down. The chair wobbled slightly against the tiled floor. "Traffic bad?" Marin asked, not looking up from her wineglass. "No," I said. "I was on time." My mother adjusted her napkin. "We were just talking about how busy Marin's been. She's running 3 projects at once. Can you imagine?" I smiled faintly. "I can." They didn't ask what I'd been working on. They never did. The waiter arrived with menus. He gave Marin the wine list first. She gestured toward me. "She'll probably just have water." I felt the sting, but my voice stayed calm. "Actually, a glass of Cabernet would be nice." A pause, short but sharp. My mother frowned. Marin smirked. My father cleared his throat. The waiter nodded politely and left. Small talk followed, half compliments, half barbs. "Still single?" "You should come work for your sister. She could teach you a few things." "Don't you ever get lonely living by yourself?" Each question landed like a pebble against glass. I smiled through them all. When the waiter returned with the wine, he placed it carefully in front of me. "Here you go, ma'am." "Thank you," I said, taking a slow sip. I noticed the reservation name printed on the corner of the menu. Marin Doyle, party of 6. No mention of heart anywhere, not even a trace. Invisible, I thought. Always invisible. I pressed my palm against the tablecloth to steady my hand. My reflection shimmered faintly in the glass surface. Steady, quiet, contained. "Just survive it," I whispered again, too softly for anyone else to hear. I looked up and caught Marin's smile. Perfect, effortless, practiced. The kind of smile that said she'd already won something I never entered to compete for. And as the conversation drifted to vacation plans and new houses, I sat there, the hum of the restroom door opening and closing beside me. The seat wasn't an accident. It never was. The scent of truffle oil and oversprayed perfume mingled in the air as I shifted slightly in my seat, half hidden behind a massive potted fern. The leafy branches brushed my shoulder every time someone walked past to the restroom. It was strategic, just like everything else at this table. Marin was already mid-story, her voice smooth and practiced. And then the client said, "You're the only person I trust with this rollout." Can you believe that? Her white blazer practically glowed under the soft lighting. Everyone laughed, even my father, whose laugh usually came in the form of a grunt. My mother leaned in, her pearl earrings swinging slightly as she touched Marin's arm. "Everyone in church has been talking about that campaign you ran. You should hear the compliments we get. Honestly, Marin, you make us so proud." My bread plate was still untouched. The waiter circled the table, pouring chilled water into crystal glasses, skipping mine as if I weren't there. I waited a beat, then another. "Excuse me," I said softly, catching his sleeve. "Could I get some water too?" He blinked, as if just realizing I was part of the group, then nodded quickly. Of course. Sorry about that. I murmured, happens, and smiled. It wasn't real, but it was enough. You still working that little job of yours? Marin asked, sipping her wine without looking at me. I kept my eyes on the butter dish. Something like that. Her boyfriend chuckled. Man, I read somewhere teachers can barely pay rent nowadays. Rough out there. I let the smile linger just long enough to be polite. Rough everywhere, I guess. Their laughter returned like clockwork, ignoring the edge in my tone. I stayed quiet. It was easier. Let them think what they want, I told myself. If I corrected them, it would turn into a performance. And I was too old, too tired for theater. Marin's phone buzzed, and she held it up, grinning. New office photo. Just got it today. She swiped once and showed my mother. Top floor, full glass view. We're expanding again next quarter. My mother gasped like she was looking at a grandchild's sonogram. Oh, Marin, it's stunning. You've built something real, haven't you? My father nodded in approval. That's what success looks like. Responsibility, ambition, presentation. Their words hung in the air like judgment disguised as praise. I looked down at my napkin, neatly folded on my lap. A small clink broke the moment. The waiter had dropped a folded napkin near me as he passed. Without a word, I bent down, picked it up, and handed it back to him with a small nod. He gave a quiet thanks, and I returned to my chair. No one at the table noticed, but in that moment, that small gesture, simple, unacknowledged, felt like an anchor. Dignity doesn't always come with applause. My mother sighed theatrically and turned toward me. Raina, you're almost 40. Don't you think it's time to do something serious with your life? The words landed like a cold slap. I didn't flinch, not externally. But inside, I felt that familiar squeeze behind my ribs. Not everyone's meant for greatness, Mom. Marin chimed in with a grin, buttering her roll slowly. I didn't respond. I just tightened my grip around the napkin in my lap until my knuckles paled. One breath, then another. If I told them the truth, the promotions, the contracts, the income, they'd find a way to diminish it, turn it into a competition, or worse, claim credit. I could already hear the lines. Well, we raised her right. Or maybe she finally learned from her sister. So I said nothing. Silence had become my armor, my cage. The noise at the table dulled for a moment, just long enough for a flash of memory to break through. Me, 7 years old, standing on the porch in the Texas heat. Marin beaming, holding a trophy twice her size. Our parents clapping, cheering, calling neighbors over to celebrate. I remember running inside, grabbing my sketchbook, hoping to show someone my drawings. By the time I came back out, my pages were in the trash. Art doesn't feed you, my father had said. And that was the first time I learned applause wasn't free. It was earned, but only on their terms. The waiter returned with our main courses, and I watched the plates land like parts of a script. Filet mignon for Marin, Seabass for her boyfriend, a vegan option for my mother, chicken for my father, and for me, a quiet dish of risotto, chosen by Marin on my behalf. I hadn't even ordered. My father lifted his glass. To our successful daughter, Marin. Everyone echoed the toast, smiles, clinks, cheers. No one looked at me. I picked up my glass, the rim trembling slightly in my hand. The wine inside rippled with the movement. I tightened my grip until it stilled. Just survive it. But this time, the words didn't bring comfort. They felt hollow, tired. Like a coat I'd outgrown. My jaw clenched before I could stop it. That was the moment I realized surviving wasn't enough anymore. The chime of silverware filled the quiet that followed the toast. Everyone at the table sipped from their glasses, still smiling, still basking in the glow of Marin's latest accolade. I lifted mine slightly, expecting it to be refilled like the others. The waiter had made his rounds. Marin first, of course, then Mom and Dad, even Greg, her smug little shadow of a boyfriend. But my glass remained bone dry. I raised it gently, just an inch, the kind of silent request that didn't disturb the show. The waiter noticed and returned quickly, apologizing under his breath. I nodded, offering a tight smile, but before he could pour, my mother's voice cut through like a blade under silk. "Don't interrupt," she hissed, as if I'd committed some social felony. The glass hovered for a breath before being filled, then quietly returned to the table. My hand trembled slightly. The wine wasn't cold, but the air around me suddenly was. I heard the jazz playing overhead, the clinking of ice in water glasses, but it all felt like background to the stage performance unfolding, one where I had no lines, only presence. Greg leaned in, one arm draped behind Marin's chair. "Pressure's not for everyone," he said with a chuckle. "Some people just settle, and that's fine." My father grinned. Mom gave one of those shallow, nodding laughs that meant approval. Marin didn't even look at me. She was adjusting her sleeve, glancing at the polished silver cufflink she probably made Greg wear for the evening. Settle. That word hit the back of my mind like it had a parking spot there. I'd heard it since I was a teenager. Just settle down, Raina. Settle for something secure. You don't want to end up one of those women who chased a dream into the gutter. I let out a soft laugh, not enough to show I was hurt, just enough to move the conversation along, to play the part I always played. But inside, something in me stiffened, hardened. I glanced toward the mirrored wall across the room. There I was, hair pinned back, dress simple, black, face pale, composed. I didn't look weak, I didn't look small, I looked finished, and somehow that was worse. A memory flickered without permission. Me, 15, staying up until dawn gluing charts together for Marin's science fair project because she had cheerleading practice. She got first place. I got a passing thanks and a week's worth of dark circles under my eyes. My art sketches from that same week? Tossed. "This won't pay your rent one day," Mom had said. "Focus on something useful." Present-day Marin waved her hand as she talked, flashing a new bracelet. Her voice carried. Dad leaned in, adding something about true leadership. I stared at my bread plate, untouched. They weren't lifting Marin up because she was better. They were pressing me down because they needed her to shine against something, and I'd been that something, quietly, for years. No more. "I'll manage," I said, calm and clear. Marin had just offered again to help me find a simple little condo near downtown. Her tone sugary, as if she were offering charity to a stranger. Her smirk stalled for a blink. Not even a full second. But I caught it. The tilt in her eyebrow, the tiny twitch in her jaw before she found her smile again. The room didn't go quiet, but the tone changed. Something had shifted, something they couldn't name but felt all the same. Dad cleared his throat. The dessert menus arrived. I declined mine politely. "I have work in the morning." "Work?" Marin quipped, spooning creme brulee like it was a crown. "At night?" I met her eyes for the first time in an hour. That's when the real work gets done. Nobody laughed, not even Greg. She recovered, chuckling like I'd said something cute. But it didn't land. The silence afterward wasn't empty. It was full. Full of questions they weren't brave enough to ask. Full of a presence they weren't used to feeling from me. I saw it, her discomfort, not loud, not public. But there, a small crack in the polish. My father glanced toward the window. My mother busied herself with her napkin. And for the first time since sitting down, I wasn't shrinking. I was expanding, quietly, like steam building behind a sealed lid. They didn't see it, but I did. In the mirror, behind Marin's posture and earrings and perfect hair, there was me, still, steady. They built a cage, I thought, and called it family. And tonight, I finally saw the door. But seeing the way out and walking through it aren't the same thing. I sat there, the low hum of conversation floating around me, pretending everything was normal. The air in the restaurant had shifted. Soft jazz still played, but the rhythm felt different. Uneasy. The laughter at our table had thinned, replaced with those polite, mechanical smiles families wear when they've said too much but aren't ready to stop pretending. The waiter returned with dessert, molten chocolate cakes with vanilla ice cream melting just so. Marin clapped her hands lightly. "You should try it, Raina," she said, cutting into hers. "It's not too expensive." A faint chuckle passed through the table, small and sharp. It wasn't the words, it was the way she said them. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I didn't show it. I lifted my spoon slowly, let it hover midair, then rested it back down. Greg, ever the chorus to Marin's melody, smirked. "You're lucky, Raina. Not everyone gets to dine like this. Some people only dream of family nights like these." My father joined in, his voice steady, casual, as if reciting a weather report. "Yes, Raina, you should learn to pick up your dignity. You're just trash under your sister's feet." The sound of it sliced through me, quiet but absolute. Even the clinking glasses stopped for a second. My mother's fork froze in midair, then she laughed a little too brightly. "Oh, stop, Harold. You're terrible." But she wasn't really scolding him. That was her way of agreeing. I didn't move, didn't blink. My breath caught halfway, suspended. Trash. Of all the things I'd been called in my life, that one landed differently. It wasn't just an insult, it was a declaration. My mind flashed back, uninvited. My father's hand guiding mine over a piece of paper when I was 6. "Write your name proudly," he'd said. His hand had been warm then, steady. Now that same voice was weaponized, cutting into me with a kind of ease that only long practice can produce. I lowered my gaze to my lap. The napkin I'd been holding slipped from my hand, falling softly to the floor. The waiter noticed, rushing over instinctively, but I stopped him with a quiet, steady voice. "It's fine," I said. "Let it stay." He hesitated, confused, then nodded and backed away. That small refusal, it was nothing, really. But it felt like the first boundary I'd ever drawn in that family. I wasn't cleaning up their mess anymore. I could feel every eye at the table watching me for a reaction, waiting for me to shrink again, to make it easier for them to feel big. I didn't. Instead, I looked at each of them, one by one. First my mother, whose smile was trembling now, then my father, who looked away, Greg, trying not to choke on his dessert, and finally, Marin, still perfect, still pretending this was just another harmless evening. "I understand now," I said, quietly. Marin tilted her head, a small nervous laugh escaping her. "Understand what?" I smiled, not bitterly, just knowing. "Who you all really are." The words were soft, but they landed hard. The air shifted again, heavier this time. My father's face tightened. My mother's napkin twisted in her hands. Marin's laughter faltered completely. "I didn't mean," she began. "Yes, you did," I said gently. "You all did." For once there was no tremor in my voice, no guilt, just a strange, calm certainty. I felt something lift off me, years of apology, of trying to earn a seat at a table that never had a place for me. I picked up my glass and took a sip of water. The ice clinked softly, the only sound left. "I think that's enough family time for one night," I said, sliding my chair back. The legs scraped lightly against the floor, that tiny sound somehow louder than their laughter had been minutes before. Marin blinked, recovering her poise. "You're leaving already?" I gave a small nod. Just need a minute. As I walked toward the restroom, I passed the cashier counter. My hand brushed the cool marble surface for a moment. I could see the waiter folding receipts, the glint of the card reader catching the dim light. I didn't stop, but I made a mental note. In the mirror near the hallway, I caught my reflection again. For the first time that evening, I didn't see someone trying to disappear. I looked steady, present. They wanted a ghost, I thought. They'll get one, but not the one they expect. I smoothed my hair, straightened my shoulders, and walked back toward the table. They were laughing again, forced, brittle, pretending nothing had happened. My mother's tone was high, Marin's too sweet. My father was pretending to check his phone. Greg was talking about his investment property, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. I sat back down, my pulse slow, deliberate. I rested my hands on the tablecloth, one over the other, perfectly calm. "Since everyone's so proud tonight," I said, my tone even, "let's make it official." They all turned to me at once, faces tight with confusion. That was when I reached for my wallet, and the air changed. It wasn't the motion itself that shifted the room. It was what came with it, the silence that fell, the subtle straightening of shoulders, the instinctive glances between family members who just realized something was happening outside their control. The waiter stood nearby, holding the leather check folder, smiling politely. My father, as expected, reached for his back pocket, already assuming the role of provider. But before he could pull out his worn leather wallet, I spoke. "No, please," I said softly. "Allow me." The words were calm, even gentle, but they carried weight. My father froze mid-motion, his hand still half inside his jacket. My mother looked up, eyes wide with faint surprise. Then came the laughter. "Oh, Raina," Marin said, still smiling that polished smile she'd perfected over the years. "You don't have to pretend. Dad's got it, like always." Pretend. That word echoed through me like a familiar bruise being pressed again. My whole life, that's what I'd been doing in their eyes. Pretending. Pretending to matter, pretending to work hard, pretending to be enough. I gave a small nod, the kind that doesn't argue but doesn't yield either. "I insist." Before anyone could protest, I reached into my small clutch and pulled out a sleek, matte black credit card. It caught the low amber light from the chandelier above, its surface clean and understated. No logo, no shine, just quiet authority. The waiter's smile shifted instantly. His posture straightened. "Of course, Ms. Hart," he said with a nod that carried a tone of respect I hadn't heard all evening. "I'll take care of that right away." The sound of the card sliding across the table was almost surgical, sharp, final. For a moment, that sound was the only one in the room. My father's hand stopped midair, wallet half open. My mother blinked once, then again. Marin's fork rested on her plate, her mouth parted slightly. The waiter disappeared toward the register, and silence settled like dust after an explosion. Marin was the first to recover. "You have that card?" I smiled faintly. "It's just a piece of plastic." My father cleared his throat, the sound small but jagged. "That kind of card isn't just a piece of plastic, Raina." Before I could answer, Marin jumped in, her tone quick, defensive. "You probably borrowed it from someone. People like you don't just have that kind of card." I turned to her slowly, my expression still soft. "Then maybe you should ask why he just called me Ms. Hart, and not Mrs. anyone else." That landed. The air thickened again, not from noise this time, but from the sudden lack of it. My father's eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to piece together a version of reality that fit the daughter he thought he knew. They don't know, I thought. They never asked. All those nights, working late, the missed holidays, the quiet promotions, none of it had ever mattered because I hadn't told them, because I'd learned long ago that my victories were safest in silence. I built myself, I thought, from the quiet they gave me. I remembered the first big project I'd led alone. The conference room emptying out at midnight while I stayed behind, writing reports by the light of my laptop. I remembered signing my first contract under my own company's name, my hands shaking, not from fear, but disbelief. And I remembered that first paycheck, the number so surreal I just stared at it, unable to move, the same way I was staring at my family now. The waiter returned, bowing slightly, holding the folder with both hands. "Your loyalty status grants an automatic discount, Ms. Hart," he said respectfully. "Would you like the receipt emailed?" Every eye at the table flicked toward him, then toward me. "Yes," I said, smiling lightly. "Please." The words were simple, but they landed like thunder. My mother looked stricken, not from pride, but confusion. "You should have told us, Raina." "Why?" I asked quietly. "So you could take credit for it too?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Marin's fingers twisted the napkin in her lap. Tight, restless. The same napkin I'd let fall earlier in the evening. It was poetic, really, how something so small could come full circle. I looked at her, not unkindly. "You've spent years trying to convince everyone you're the only success in this family. Maybe it's time you realized you just talk louder." Her jaw tightened. "You're still the same bitter girl you've always been." "No," I said softly. "I'm the woman you didn't expect to see." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was clean, like a cut that finally stopped bleeding. The waiter returned with the signed receipt. I thanked him, slid my card back into my clutch, and stood. "You're leaving?" my father asked, still stunned. "Yes," I said simply. "I've paid for this dinner and everything before it." For the first time, I didn't wait for approval. I didn't look for their faces as I walked away. I didn't even hear the noise of the restaurant anymore, just the sound of my heels against the floor, steady, sure. I pushed the door open, the cool night air brushing against my skin like freedom. Behind me, I could almost feel their eyes, still processing, still trying to rewrite the story they'd been telling themselves for years. But I was already gone. Because the story wasn't finished, not while they still believed they were the victims. The door of the restaurant clicked shut behind me, and the air outside hit my skin like a long-forgotten truth. A mild breeze slipped through the parking lot, carrying the hum of traffic and the faint scent of jasmine from the hotel next door. The neon lights reflected off the windows of the cars, giving everything a strange, cinematic glow. I stood there for a beat, clutch in one hand, keys in the other. I hadn't realized how tense my shoulders had been until they finally dropped. Freedom, it turned out, felt quiet. Then, footsteps. "Raina, wait!" I knew that voice. That controlled panic laced with motherly authority, like she was still calling me in from the front yard at age 9. I didn't turn, not yet. Marin was the first to reach me. Her heels clicked fast against the concrete. "You didn't have to show off like that," she said, breath short, her voice too sweet to be real. I turned slowly. "Show off?" She gave a tight smile. "You made Dad look bad." Behind her, our father approached with slow, deliberate steps, his jaw set like stone. "Family doesn't humiliate each other in public," he said, voice low, like he was laying down a law. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You mean like calling me trash in front of a full restaurant?" His eyes flicked away. Marin opened her mouth, but closed it again. Then Mom stepped forward, hands up like she was defusing a bomb. "You misunderstood. Your father was joking. You've always been too sensitive, Raina." There it was, the old card, the soft voice, the guilt-laced smile. The manipulation that had been playing in the background of my life since I was old enough to hear it. And for a moment, Just a moment. I felt it pulling at me again. That instinct to apologize, to smooth the edges, to be the peacemaker even when I was bleeding. But something inside me stayed still. Maybe I am sensitive, I said slowly. That's why I finally stopped listening. Behind us, the hum of the city continued like nothing was happening. Marin's boyfriend, arms crossed, scoffed. "You think a black card makes you better than us?" I met his eyes. "No, but it makes me free." That hit harder than I expected. Dad stepped forward, his voice sharper now. "You've changed." I nodded. "Yes, because staying the same would have killed me." A couple passed by on the sidewalk, slowing their steps when they caught the tone of the conversation. I watched Mom glance at them, straighten her blouse, smooth her expression. Always worried about how it looked, never what it meant. "You've always had a flair for drama," she muttered. I looked at her, truly looked, and felt something shift again. Flash, me at 17, being told not to talk back at Thanksgiving. Be the quiet one, Raina. That's how people love you. Back then, I believed her. But that silence cost me my voice. It cost me promotions, friendships, love. That silence cost me everything, I said out loud. Marin stepped closer, eyes blazing. "You think all this little performance, makes you better? You're still alone, Raina. Still the same sad little girl." I didn't flinch. "Maybe," I said, "but it's my kind of alone." And that landed, sharp, clean, no yelling, no chaos, just stillness. Dad looked away. Mom blinked hard. Marin's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse tighter. I turned toward my car. My heels tapped calmly across the pavement. Keys in hand, I paused, glanced back one final time. "You can keep your table," I said. "Your toasts, your little throne. I've got something better. Peace." I didn't wait for a response. I slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, and started the engine. Through the rearview mirror, I saw them still standing there, figures frozen in the fluorescent glow of the parking lot. "Raina!" Marin's voice cracked through the dark. But I was already shifting into drive. City lights slid across my windshield like soft brushstrokes, streaking past as the street opened ahead. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. I almost ignored it. One more voice from tonight was more than I could take. But something, intuition maybe, made me pick it up. "Ms. Hart?" the voice said, clear and professional. "This is from the firm. The board meeting has been approved for tomorrow. You're officially on the agenda." I smiled faintly, eyes still on the road. "Thank you," I said. Because tomorrow, the real chapter of my life would begin. One where they'd finally see what I've built without them. Morning light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, casting long lines across the polished marble floor. The skyline stretched beyond the glass like a silent witness. I stood before the mirror in the executive restroom, adjusting the collar of my navy blazer. Sharp, structured, every line of it deliberate. I studied my reflection, not searching for flaws, but simply recognizing myself. This version of me wouldn't have begged for respect. She didn't flinch at silence, didn't shrink from space. She knew her name. Last night, I paid their bill. Today, I collect mine. I stepped out, heels soft against the tile, and made my way to the boardroom down the corridor. The glass table inside gleamed under the morning sun, a mirrored surface that reflected power rather than absorbed it. "Good morning, Ms. Hart," my colleague said, nodding with a professional smile as I entered. A subtle shift, but unmistakable. No one in this room asked me where I lived, who I belonged to, or why I wasn't more like someone else. Here, my voice didn't need permission. It had weight by default. I clicked through slides, fielded questions, dissected forecasts. The deal was complicated, a high-stakes acquisition that had taken months to navigate. But here I was, leading it. My fingers moved across the table's touchscreen with quiet precision, the same hands that once trembled as they passed serving dishes while dodging ridicule. Now they pointed at numbers, timelines, terms. Confident, steady. Halfway through the presentation, I caught movement near the door. My assistant leaned in slightly, whispering, "There's a family asking to see you. They said it's urgent." My pulse didn't jump. I already knew. "Pause the presentation for 5 minutes," I said smoothly, then stepped out into the hallway. The lobby's white stone floors made every sound crisp. My family stood near the reception desk like they didn't belong. Because they didn't, not here. Marin in her high-end wrap coat, trying to look casual. Mom with that familiar sad smile she used when she wanted forgiveness without the work. Dad stiff, hands behind his back like he was at a funeral. And the boyfriend, awkward and silent this time. I walked up, letting the silence stretch. Mom spoke first, her voice low. "We didn't sleep much last night. We were wrong, Raina." Dad nodded, slowly. "You've done well for yourself. We're proud of you." I watched them carefully. The words were right, but the faces weren't. Too smooth, too rehearsed. Then Marin stepped forward with the cherry on top. "Maybe we could help," she said. Smile sweet, but eyes sharp. "You've always needed a little push. This success, you could do so much more with the right visibility." And there it was, not remorse, not recognition. They wanted in. I didn't raise my voice, didn't need to. "You always told me to learn dignity," I said. "I did. That's why I no longer need your validation." Dad's expression hardened. "Don't talk to us like that. We're still your family." I nodded. And family doesn't break someone down, then show up for the photo when they finally stand up. A flicker in Marin's jaw. Mom's hand tightened around her purse strap. Even the boyfriend looked uncomfortable now. Behind us, the reflection on the glass wall caught all of it. Me, standing poised in front of them. Their image behind mine. Fuzzy, distant, small. "Ms. Hart?" my assistant interrupted gently. "The board is ready." I gave a small nod. Turning back to them, I said, "Excuse me, I have real work to do." I walked away. No one followed. Inside the boardroom, I slipped back into my seat, hands calm, voice steady. The presentation resumed. Questions flowed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt no weight dragging behind me. For years, I thought proving myself meant they'd finally love me, I thought. But some people only see you clearly when you walk away. The meeting wrapped up with a quiet round of affirmations and handshakes. I gathered my things, checked my phone. One new message. From Marin. "You'll regret this. You think money makes you safe?" I stared at it for a moment, then locked the screen without replying. It's not money, it's freedom. And I'd fought hard for every inch of it. 2 days passed like the soft exhale after a storm. My office, high above downtown, sat still in the quiet hum of the late evening. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city lights like stars fallen to earth. I worked alone, contracts spread before me, my fingers clicking softly on the keyboard. I'd forgotten what peace felt like, the kind that wasn't bought or borrowed, just earned, step by bloody step. Freedom is quiet, too quiet sometimes. The knock came fast. My assistant burst through the door without waiting. "Ms. Hart, you need to see this." Her voice cracked. She was usually composed, almost too much so. That crack made my stomach shift. She placed a folder in front of me, her hand trembling slightly. "There's been a data breach. Financial documents, internal deal memos, contracts. It's out." I blinked. Out? Leaked. And the login credentials used to access them, they were yours. My mouth went dry. For a split second, the world tipped on its side. My own name tied to sabotage? I could barely form the word. Who? She hesitated. They're still digging, but the audit flagged a connection to Marin Avery through her partner. He's registered as an external vendor on the software system. A loophole. I leaned back, breath caught halfway. Marin's boyfriend. The same one who sat smug across from me at dinner, who joked about fancy cards and smiled like he knew something I didn't. And then it clicked. Her message. You think money makes you safe? It wasn't a warning. It was a trap. And I'd walked right into it. I stood slowly. Get me legal, now. Rage coiled in my chest. Not loud, not wild. Surgical, sharp. I'd learned long ago that true power wasn't in the scream. It was in the silence after. The next few hours blurred. Meetings, phone calls, document trails, screens lit up with timelines and timestamps. I watched everything unravel and then start to restitch, this time in my favor. That night, I returned home, dropped my keys by the door, and poured myself a glass of wine. My apartment was too quiet, the kind of quiet that lets your own thoughts chase you down. I stood by the window, staring out at the city's glow, watching cars pass like moments I could never get back. They couldn't destroy me with shame, I thought, tracing the rim of my glass. So now they'll try with scandal. I walked over to the drawer in my console and pulled out a folded napkin. The one from that dinner, untouched, pressed clean like memory. I laid it on the table, not to mourn anything, just to remind myself how far I'd come from the girl who once held it to wipe tears she wouldn't let fall. The next morning, I arrived at the office before sunrise. The building buzzed low with lights turning on and coffee brewing down the hallway. I carried the flash drive in one hand and walked into the executive conference room with the other resting steady at my side. I laid the evidence out, clear, undeniable. Login paths, IP trails, internal messaging that linked everything to a consultant connected to Marin's partner. The room went still. One of the board members cleared his throat. Ms. Hart, this is thorough. Another spoke. You were falsely implicated. We owe you an apology. And just like that, I was cleared. But more than that, I was believed. Later that evening, my phone rang. I stared at the name on the screen. Dad, I answered, voice neutral. We didn't know, he said. We didn't know he'd do that. Please believe me. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of the words settle. You raised him around people who think hurting others is power, I said gently. And maybe that made sense in your world, but not in mine. I'm still your father, he said, more quietly. And I don't hate you, I answered, but I'm done pretending we're the same kind of people. There was nothing left to say. I hung up. Later that night, I found myself by the same window, wine in hand. The city hadn't changed, but I had. They called me a failure because I didn't belong to their world, I whispered into the glass. They were right. I built my own. A soft ding pulled me out of the moment. I checked my phone. A donation confirmation, $10,000 wired to a mentorship program for young women starting careers with no support system. Girls like I once was. I smiled, not because it was a victory, but because it was mine. Another buzz, an email this time. Subject line, family reunion, 6 months later. I didn't open it, just stared. Maybe I'll go, I said to no one. Maybe I won't. I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and let the silence stay. I didn't open the email for weeks. I saw it sitting there every time I checked my inbox. Bold, unread, unchanging. Family reunion, 6 months later. It didn't guilt me. It didn't pull at my chest. But one evening, after a long flight home and a quiet dinner alone, I clicked it. Not because I missed them, because I wanted to know if they'd learned anything, or just moved the furniture around their same old silence. I tapped accept invitation with no fanfare. Just a soft exhale. Spring in Texas had a way of making everything look cleaner than it really was. Green lawns, blooming azaleas, sunshine bouncing off freshly washed windows. Their backyard looked almost unchanged. Same white fence, same over-trimmed rose bushes. The scent of barbecue hovered in the air, mingling with the sharp tang of charcoal and nostalgia. I parked down the block and walked slowly. Not dragging my feet, not storming in, just walking. Each step steady. I wasn't the same woman who'd walked out of that restaurant all those months ago, and everyone knew it. Some cousins waved from the back porch, unsure whether to hug me or just smile. I smiled back, enough to be kind, not enough to be close. Maren saw me first. "You look different," she said, as if trying to swallow the rest of the sentence. "I am." We stood there for a beat too long, then she stepped aside. I moved past her without touching. Dad was by the grill. His hands trembled just slightly as he flipped the ribs, but he didn't look surprised to see me. Just tired, worn in a way I didn't remember. "We're glad you came," he said quietly. "I am too." That was all. No grand apologies, no second act of drama. Just space, wide, clear space where there used to be weight. It wasn't awkward, it was settled. Inside, I helped myself to iced tea, wandered over to the long folding table beneath the patio umbrella. That's when I saw them. Napkins, folded just like the ones from that night. The same soft cream color, tucked into the shape of little leaves. I stared at them for a moment. No one noticed. No one would have thought twice. I picked one up, unfolded it slowly, laid it flat beside my plate. No need to comment, no need to stir anything up, just not repeating what doesn't serve me anymore. Later, my father sat beside me on the wooden bench, his plate empty, napkin crumpled. "We said things we can't take back," he said. I didn't rush to answer. I waited until the wind rustled the fence slats behind us. "I know," I said, "and I've stopped trying to take them back for you." He didn't flinch. That was the first time in years I said something hard to him, and he didn't look away. Mom came by, carrying a bowl of coleslaw. She sat it down and lingered. "Do you forgive us?" she asked, her voice low. I smiled, but not in a way that sought connection. "I don't need to," I said. "I understand you." There it was. The truth I'd been building toward. Not a dagger, not a hug, just a quiet truth that didn't ask anything in return. They both nodded, unsure if they should feel relieved or ashamed. That wasn't my problem anymore. The rest of the afternoon passed in fragments. Someone playing cornhole, kids chasing bubbles, a neighbor dropping off a tray of brownies. I sat and watched, content, detached, like observing a town I once lived in but no longer called home. I thought of the young women I mentored now, how they cried the first time they signed a lease with money they earned, how they spoke up in meetings and didn't shrink when someone cut them off, how they reminded me of someone I used to be. Family isn't always who raised you. Sometimes it's who clapped for you when no one else did. As I slipped my shoes back on and gathered my bag, Dad called out from the porch, "Don't be a stranger." I paused, turned, and for the first time all day, I gave him something more than politeness, a genuine smile. "Maybe next time," I said, "we'll talk about something other than what I'm worth." He nodded. No defense, no smirk. Just a man finally understanding what that sentence cost me to carry all these years. I walked down the sidewalk as the sun dipped low behind the rooftops. The air felt light on my skin, soft, not sharp. There was no weight pulling me back, no ache in my chest, just forward. On the drive home, I didn't turn on the radio. I let the hum of the tires and the beat of my own breath fill the space. "I used to think dignity was something others gave you," I whispered. Turns out, it's what you build when no one believes in you. They called me trash once, but from the ground, things grow. The city skyline rose in the distance, clean lines against a glowing sky. Home. And as I pulled into the quiet of my apartment garage, I felt it settle in fully. I didn't need them to see my worth. I just needed to stop asking for it.